welcome to the Intuitively Wild podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Levine. Living intuitively wild is about coming back home to ourselves. Here, we talk about how to live connected to ourselves, others, and nature, and make a commitment to radical authenticity, vulnerability, and acceptance. On this podcast, we delve into a wide range of topics that span the human experience. We peel back the layers and talk about the things that are often not talked about. This is a space for us all to walk and wander this path of life together. Let's dig into our roots and go deep. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Intuitively Wild podcast. Today, we are joined by two very special guests, and their names are Julie and Jessica, and they are the authors of Seasons of Sound, a book about sound healing practices for all of life's seasons. Both Julie and Jessica are entrepreneurs and very passionate about sharing the magic of sound healing to help us truly live connected to ourselves. And they're all about giving practical, accessible, simple, and profound techniques and tools for each individual to embody in their everyday life. This is a really fun and powerful conversation, and I think you're going to walk away with a lot of insights and perspectives on yourself and how to embrace yourself in new ways, and also tools on how to do that and knowledge about what sound healing is, what yoga is, and how to walk your individual path to connection and wholeness. Julie and Jessica, welcome to the podcast. It is so exciting to have you here. So fun to have two other guests on. And I'm just really excited to get into this conversation with you.
Thanks so much for having us. We're so happy to be here.
So the question that I like to start with is, what is something you wish people knew about you that you don't think many do?
This is Jessica speaking. And again, thanks again for having us, Rachel. This is so much fun, and I've enjoyed listening to your show. So this is going to be a great chat, I know. I guess something that I think is surprising that maybe people know this, I don't know. I find myself to be a little bit more introverted than perhaps I let on. So
that's actually, I think, the most common answer. So that's
so funny.
It's interesting.
This is Julie, and I think people who spend a little bit of time with me realize pretty fast, but I think maybe just from knowing me from the yoga or the sound world, they might not know I'm just really pretty goofy and silly most 99% of the time. So I feel like that's one reason I think I'm drawn so much to yoga and meditation, is just to recenter and counterbalance how ridiculous I usually am.
I love that. Well, I would love to start from the beginning. Both of your journeys to finding yoga, to finding spirituality, to finding the sound healing, wherever you want to start with that. I always find it really interesting, being a lover and practitioner of yoga myself, to hear people's stories to finding it.
Oh yeah, I love this question, and I like what you said too. It is always interesting to hear kind of the origin story of our yoga journeys, because they're usually very individual, and yet there are so many similarities that I believe we can all relate to. In a nutshell, I came into yoga after starting my corporate career. I was a dancer as a kid, and I thought all the arts were going to be left behind in favor of finding a real job, quote unquote. And I found myself very stressed out of tune with myself in all levels, anxious and very disconnected from day to day. And I landed in oddly enough, a corporate gym yoga class was my first class. And I had no idea what was going on. Being from a small town, I had moved to a bigger city and had no experience or awareness of yoga at all, but it happened that I ended up in this class, and I knew, even though I had no idea what I was doing the entire time, that it was going to be a really big deal for me. That was my first toe dipped into the deep well of yoga for me.
So this is Julie, and in the I came to yoga in a very, very random way. I don't even know if I had been to a church before, 'cause I was raised Baha'i, but I went to my mom's real estate agent at the time, taught a yoga class at her church. And my grandfather's girlfriend was very into yoga. We became very, very close. And she did yoga until she passed in her late 90s. So she's just a huge inspiration for me in my life. But my mom took me to this church yoga class, and it was, I don't know, even though I know the elements around Christianity, I didn't really know what they were talking about, but something about the mindfulness and the breath work and the movement, I was hooked. So it's always been a practice I've always come back to. And it wasn't until I actually got really sick over 10 years ago that I relied so heavily on my meditation practice and specifically my yin practice because I didn't have a lot of mobility. And I think a lot of yoga people and meditation people say this quite frequently. It's like when times are tough, it's what they fall back on. And it was definitely the case for me. So then, yeah, when my health really declined, I just became obsessed.
Yeah, I resonate with different pieces of both of your stories. And for me, it is the foundation I build my life off of. I don't know what I would do without my yoga practice. It is rooted in every single part of my life. And like you said, it is what I fall back on and it is what supports me. I am just such a believer that whatever way you can incorporating yoga into your life will change your life.
Absolutely. I so agree with you.
It's so true. I have a yoga studio outside of Austin, and this morning someone was looking to just rent this space for their nonprofit. And she just kept telling me how much she wants to do yoga, she wants to do meditation. And then she ended up telling me about her morning, and she's a grandmother, and her granddaughter was staying with her. And she talked about mindfully preparing her granddaughter's lunch with her this morning. And she described it in such a beautiful, meditative way that she was working with this 5-year-old to make choices that intuitively felt good for her. It was really beautiful how she helped her 5-year-old granddaughter pick out her lunch. But I was like, that's it. That's the yoga. That is the practice. So I was telling her, I was like, this is all we teach and all we do. And it's about the integration into real life. It's not about the 60-minute or the 75-minute class. Those are wonderful, but really it's about the integration into the small things that we do throughout life. So it was so beautiful hearing her this morning, but it was funny because I was like, you don't need a 60-minute class. Like, I have so much to learn from you.
No, it's so true. I think people think that there are so many barriers to entry when it comes to yoga, but I really think that that's because of the misconception of what yoga truly is. Like, yes, of course, it is the asana, the physical practice, and that can be a really beautiful and impactful way of incorporating yoga into your life. But at its essence, that isn't what yoga is. And it's our embodiment of all the aspects, all the different limbs of yoga that really bring it into our lives in a true, tangible way. Okay. So I want to talk more about sound healing because even if someone is so immersed and enmeshed in the yoga world, there might still not be an understanding of what sound healing is, or many people might not have ever tried it. So I would love to hear what sound healing is from your perspective.
I love this question. It's a fun one to unpack because I agree. Even if you are closely connected with the mindfulness community, be it yoga, meditation, sound healing tends to fit nicely with many different modalities, and yet we may not fully understand what the experience actually is meant to be. We like to say, kind of in a nutshell, sound healing is a passive listening experience that is creating a calm and safe space for a meditative practice. That can sometimes look like things that you see on Instagram where there's gorgeous crystal singing bowls and gongs and chimes and more, people reclining back on yoga mats. Sometimes they're in seated meditation, but sometimes it's as simple as as using your own voice outside of these more formal sound bath experiences. It's a vast practice, and it's not limited to just a singing bowl, but it's much more wide and broad. And at the very root of it, it goes back to just what you were saying. It's all about mindfulness. It's all about coming back to breath, coming back to the present moment, and sound is the vehicle that we use in a sound healing experience to do that.
Something I really wanted to highlight that you said is that it creates a safe space for people to meditate and be still. And I love that because that's something that I talk about with people so often. People bring to me so often is this uncomfortable association with being still and with meditation. And through working with people more closely, I really do think it's because our bodies don't feel safe in the stillness. And if we're able to ease ourselves into that through other tools such as sound healing, I think it can help more people find a sense of safety within stillness and allow them to find the medicine of meditating and just softening into that.
It makes me a little emotional even just to hear you talk about that, Rachel. That's so much of, I think, what Jessica and I are trying to help people with is finding comfort and ease in stillness. And you just said it all so eloquently. The way that we do it is maybe through a more indirect approach of telling people to prioritize their comfort, and in telling people that they have the freedom of movement, that they're welcome to get up and get water. They're welcome to wave us down for another prop in a sound bath, or they're welcome to readjust at any time. Sometimes by just knowing internally that you have the freedom of movement, it helps you actually to find the stillness. That is what we're looking for, but we don't state it in such a direct way. Because if someone tells you, like, don't think about an elephant in a refrigerator or whatever, you're going to think about the elephant in the refrigerator. I think it's the same thing about stillness. If you tell me to be still, all of a sudden I'm going to panic, and the last thing I'm going to want to do is be still. So through a trauma-informed approach of allowing lots of options, and then also giving people the gift of hearing the sounds before even the sound bath, introducing the gong, the chimes, the bowls, whatever we might have, so people don't have the element of surprise either. They're prepared for what those sounds might be. So we ruin the surprise, invite movement, and all of this is to help enter a deeper state of relaxation and feeling of security and safety.
Yeah, I think it's important to ruin the surprise, especially it depends who you're working with, but especially if you're working with people who struggle with mental health or trauma, having that element of control in that way can really support you. And also taking away any rigidity and rules and perfectionism and just saying, find your entry into this, find how this works for you. And reminding people that they have the freedom of movement, that you want to be comfortable, that you don't have to just sit up in a seated position like you might think when you think of meditation. It takes away the illusion or the facade that I think people have around meditation.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, what you just said, just like kind of like this illusion of what we assume meditation is, or what we've seen in books or in articles. And it's all about perfectly calm, clear mind. There's no thought. Your body is still, and you're sitting floating on a lotus, and everything is perfect. And that's just not reality. Our minds aren't quiet ever. We're lucky if we get those little glimpses of space. And usually those glimpses are created by the safety things that you were just mentioning, the permission to adjust so that your body can relax. And perhaps then with the relaxed body, your mind can also have a break.
Exactly. And similar to my question about yoga, what is your origin story when it comes to sound healing? So, how did you discover it? What was that moment like? And how did you decide to embrace it as such a large part of your work?
Before I knew that sound healing had a term such as sound healing or being a sound practitioner, I grew up in a household in which I woke up every morning with my father chanting, and actually learned chanting as a child. My dad's from Iran, and the religion that I was raised in, chanting was a big part of it. It always felt so good to chant, but I had no idea why. I didn't realize that there's also scientific reasons that we feel great when we chant. So it was a component of my life growing up that later in life I moved away from. And then it wasn't until connecting for the first time with the yoga sound healing world that I realized this piece meant so much to me of my life and just resonated so deeply with me. And that was actually through Jessica. So I have a studio outside of Austin. And when we first opened 6.5 years ago, Jess was bringing bowls and gongs to the studio. And especially the gong, I immediately resonated with. I felt like all of my stress had just been washed away. And talking earlier about how sound healing, it's a passive experience, or it can be this like mindful experience of bringing your awareness to something outside of the fluctuations of your mind and into this single pointed awareness of something beneficial for your body. With the gong, I can't focus on anything else. It's really hard for me to feel stress or worry when I'm listening and now in my life playing the gong. It just cuts through all the chaos. So even early on, I knew I had a big affinity for the gong. So I'm so fortunate that I have Jess in my life for a lot of reasons, but one of the big ones is for really bringing these really purposefully designed sound experiences to my life. So thank you, Jessica.
I'm so generous.
So, Jessica, what's your origin story?
It goes right back to corporate. So I started as a musician, as a part of the dance and the arts. Like I was very much immersed in it as a child. It was an escape for me from all the pressures, and home life wasn't the best. And it was one of those things that I was able to, back to what Julie was saying, it was like one of the things I felt so good about. I didn't understand why, but I knew that it was very healing to me from the dance and then and into the sound playing music when I was a kid. And then again, it was something I had let go of, thinking that this was never going to serve me. I moved on, I'm past this or something, whatever we tell ourselves when we decide that we need to grow up. And I left it all behind. It was once I had finished my yoga teacher training several years ago, working my corporate job, sometimes 70 to 80 hours a week, depending on, what was going on. And I had taken a mental health day on a day it normally wouldn't be off. And I picked the first yoga class I could make it to, showed up, and the teacher was playing bowls and shavasana. And it was the most healing, supportive experience and incredibly timed. I needed it so badly. I didn't sign up for a sound bath. I didn't know that that was what was going to happen. It was one of those serendipitous moments when things just align. And I knew the whole time that I was in Shavasana, even though I was relaxed, I needed to know more. So I went straight up to the teacher. Yoga teachers who are listening are probably laughing because we've all seen this student. I've been this student, just wanting to ask so many questions like, what is it that you're doing? I mean, I need to know more. And he's incredibly kind. And he ended up being my first sound healing teacher. I learned the basics of the bowls, the gong. I understood a little bit more about the science. And it was really the catalyst for me to start my practice and to learn more. And it became, in those 70, 80-hour work weeks, it was a strike of the bowl on my way out back to the office. It was a moment in my car when all I could do was escape for a few minutes to hide from whoever was needing something next. It changed my life in so many regards. And I'm so thankful for that whole journey, because I don't know that if it had happened in any other way that it would be as impactful and somehow became my life's work. It all happens as it's supposed to. So.
Isn't that amazing how something that just fell into your lap and started as a simple gong while you're running out the door has now become your entire life? I think that's so important for all of us to remember, because your life can change in ways that you could never even imagine. And we just need to be open for that to happen and curious about how that could happen. And something else that you both touched on is how these are themes that reconnected you to your childhood and were already showing up in your childhood, whether it's with the music or the dancing. I'm really interested in that because I think that there is so much healing that can be found in coming back to what brought us joy in childhood. And even if it takes a different form, the essence of it is still there. And I'm curious if that's something that you guys think about a lot or that has really helped heal different aspects of your past.
It's also a serendipitous, I think, Rachel, that you're asking this question because I literally didn't think about it much until like 3 days ago.
Wow.
Yeah, that's why I was a little surprised too. Like I was talking about the chanting with my dad. Someone and I were having a conversation about it a few days ago. And then I started to connect that more to sound healing and why I enjoy it so much now. And then also, there's a big part of my life where I played the flute and music was a huge part of my life. But it's so funny that you asked that because I do think there's something so therapeutic about reconnecting with who you were specifically as a young person. Maybe it's because that gives you a glimpse of who you genuinely are. Like when you're free from the shackles of expectation and societal norms and all of that, you're just who you are at your core essence. And it's so funny that you asked such a beautiful question because I literally hadn't thought much about this until this friend and I, both of us, our dads have both passed away. And we were talking about ways that we connect now with our dads. And that was what I had said. I was like chanting when I'm alone, the
Mm.
prayers that my dad taught me as a child. And then it's just been really on my mind so much since then. So thank you for asking that.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. I got chills. And I think that yoga is all about connection and not just to ourselves, but to others and to spirit. And whether that's whatever spirit means to us, and that can be a loved one who's passed away. And so I love that you use your practice to keep that essence of your father alive around you. And Jessica, what about you? Do you have any comments around childhood and healing and reconnecting?
Oh gosh, yeah, what a big question too. I have similar memories. My dad was a musician. From my first memories, I remember him singing and playing his guitar. It's ingrained, and I have photos of him with his band from the 70s. After he passed, actually someone found and gifted to me, which was like the coolest thing ever because it was before I was born. He looked completely different, and yet he was doing the exact same thing that I remember as a kid. So it was really neat. And I definitely connect to him. I connect to the simplicity of life through music. I connect to this like non-productive side of my brain that I feel like I lost at some point. You start making music, you start playing sound or singing bowls, and there's no start or end. It just happens, and then maybe you physically stop playing, but the music is still continuing on. You're catching up with it throughout the day, and it takes you back to that creative, joyous part of you that is always there. It never goes away. Sometimes we have a difficult time reconnecting to it, but it's always there. And I feel like sound and music and movement have 100% been my key to get back to that person.
Yeah, music has been really powerful for me in that way too. I also, when I was younger, I loved dancing, I loved singing, and I shut that part of myself off for so long. And something about music just transforms me. You feel the emotions in your body. And that has helped me really heal my relationship with my emotions and to embrace them, accept them, and express them more. And I feel like sound healing, when I've gone to sound baths and different yoga classes that do sound healing, it's like I'm feeling the music in my bones, like in my cells. And it's soothing something within me, it's integrating something within me. you can't, it's not something you can put words to. It's only something you can feel.
I love what you just said there. It's very hard to give voice to or exactly pin down the moment where like, that's exactly where I reconnected. It was at this time. But it's so powerful.
And this is something that I just brought up when Julie was talking, but yoga is about connection. And I think another misconception about yoga is it's just about connection to ourselves. But my connection with yoga has brought me so many relationships and so much connection to nature and connection in all forms of the word. And that brings me to your connection with each other and your relationship and your decision to write this book together. And from what you were saying, it sounds like you, Jessica, you brought the bowls to Julie's yoga studio, but how did you two meet and how did this relationship unfold?
We have so much fun together, I think is the real answer to this
I
question.
love that answer.
But Jessica and I think we hit it off for a lot of reasons, going back to the goofy sense of humor, which I recognized in her right away, but also, and a lot of yoga people are surprisingly like this, like kind of type A. I think it draws a lot of type A people because we're looking for a little bit of balance.
Mhm.
So we're both very type A, and so we work really well together on big projects. So we're kind of big dreamers, and then we just start knocking out these crazy lists of tasks. And then we work very, very well together in that capacity. So from the beginning, we planned events together, later trainings, and then the trainings evolved into seasons of sound. And then we did the first time last week, and now it's like all I want to do. We did a professional studio recording of the sound bath together. So it's like we're still finding so many new paths of things that we enjoy working on together within sound healing, yoga, meditation. And oh my gosh, I'm like still on a super high from the recording studio experience. It was amazing. So I think we both love to like nerd out about all this stuff, but it's just still unfolding and there's so much creativity in this arena. We came up with so much new stuff that we wanted to do in the recording studio together, new ways that we had played and layered sound. So it's like, it was just really, really fun.
I love that. I think bringing the fun into it is so important because when you're collaborating with someone, it can bring up a lot of challenges. It can be hard to find the right partner to work on these big projects with, and especially with something you care so much about and you care about the message so much, but not taking it so seriously, like taking your work so seriously in the way that you think it's serious and sacred to you, but not taking the yourself so seriously, I think is definitely key. And I'm not going to go into this too much, but I do just want to say that I was just taking a quick look at both of your human design charts, and I don't know how much you guys know about human design, but you guys are very compatible, and it's fun to look at that chart and see you talk about your relationship and how you work together and just see that play out for both of you, because it really sounds like you guys are just living in alignment in a really beautiful way.
That's amazing. I don't know much about human design, so I guess we will have to know more about that from you at some point, but that's so sweet. And I feel like everything that Julie said, and I don't know, it's kind of one of those moments when you meet somebody and you're like, this person is supposed to be in my life. Like
Hmm.
there's like that kind of like meeting of the minds, meeting of the soul, or whatever you want to call it. There's those few connections that you have with people. And, you know, we connect with lots of people, of course, but there are ones that you just kind of feel like there's kind of like a puzzle piece and you're like, oh,
Yes.
I didn't realize that there wasn't that connection before, but now I recognize it. I just feel so lucky to get to create with Julie and laugh with Julie. Half the time we're working on crazy things and crazy deadlines because, as she said, we dream big and time is short for lots of big dreams sometimes. But
Mm-hmm.
we'll just look at each other in exhaustion and just start laughing. And it just makes everything better. So I just feel very lucky and excited. The sky is truly the limit for this, and for the folks who are sound healers, the folks that are interested in sound healing, just know that that's the case too. It's endless, and people are paying attention, and they need it. So we're excited to be part of it.
And I'm so glad that you guys have written this book and are sharing your message more and more, because the world does need it. And I think sound healing has been lagging a little bit in entering the mainstream behind yoga. And I think that is starting to change, and that's so powerful. And one thing that brings up for me, though, is when we're bringing it more mainstream and entering the spirituality or wellness world, I have my own issues with the word wellness and with parts of that industry, but at the core of it is something really, really beautiful. And I'm curious what wellness means to you guys.
To maybe not answer the what wellness means, but one statement using the word wellness has always, since I heard it, however many years ago, deeply resonated with me is from Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist monk. And he says oftentimes something along the lines of we're all moving towards wellness or working towards wellness. So maybe it's a state in which the collective is moving towards this state of greater ease and calm and upliftment. But I always, because I have a chronic illness, I think that really, I have several chronic illnesses, really resonated with me because that term wellness was triggering for me for a long time. It was like, well, I'm never going to be well like so and so or so and so, especially in the yoga world where people put out a perception of themselves as some kind of superhuman person that's so healthy all the time and they never get disease or anything like that. So to me, it was so beautiful that as the collective, we're working towards this state of greater happiness, greater ease, greater calm, and upliftment. So I don't know if I have an exact definition of wellness, but that really resonates with me and has been so helpful for where I'm at in my life. And so I actually close a lot of my yoga classes with that sentiment of moving towards a greater sense of ease as the collective. And that's all from Buddhism and specifically the writings of Thich Nhat Hanh.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that's a really powerful sentiment and something that's really important when it comes to talking about the wellness world, because often I think wellness can be associated with quite the opposite, with perfectionism and aesthetics and really trying to force yourself to be a certain way and do certain things to achieve that, and the opposite of ease. And bringing ease into the equation allows space for us to make it our own and to find our own path to wellness, because I really think it looks and feels differently for every single person.
So good. That's so good. And I'm glad that we're talking about this. It's also in the sound healing world and in all of the quote unquote wellness arenas. And to me, it means wholeness and remembering that we are innately whole. We don't lack anything despite what marketers would prefer us to believe. And I understand why we use that term, but at the same time, it's like it's not wellness that we're looking for. It's the remembrance of our own wholeness.
I love that. Ease and wholeness, and remembering our own wholeness within ourselves. We are enough exactly as we are. And that doesn't mean that we're not constantly moving more and more towards ease and more towards ourselves and healing and growing and transforming and all the things. But as we are right now is enough. There's nothing we need to do. And this is something that I'm constantly reminding myself of. And also, we don't need to always be trying to figure out the next step in our healing or the next perfect thing to be well. If there's something that we need to address, it will come to us. And I think tools like sound healing remind us that if we just create the space and the stillness and soften into the moment, what we need to be present with will arise.
That's so beautiful. I'm happy this is recorded, Rachel, so I can listen to you say that again. Thank you so much.
This is a really present process in my life, and also with people who I work with and other friends who I talk to. So I think it's really important to talk about. Okay, so I talk a lot about intuition and strengthening our intuition, listening to and trusting our intuition. I would love to hear about, first of all, how you think about intuition and any role it plays in your life, and if it does, what that looks like for you.
Oh, yes. Definitely in touch with intuition, and I'm more in touch perhaps than I have been in recent years since starting this, or continuing, I guess, my own journey deeper into my own story. I think intuition it's kind of a funny thing. It's like we were talking about just a minute ago. It's like you can't quite put your finger on it, but there is this like deep innate knowing when it's something that's for you or not for you. And I think the more that I've learned in my own practice to even take a minute before making a decision or jumping into the next thing, or when something is presented to me, if I feel that, I feel like also too, there's a lot of this like, hopefully I can sort of curse on this podcast, but hell yes, hell no.
Mm.
Like, I don't know if life is really that way. Sometimes you just need a second to kind of set the noise aside and truly ask, because that voice is always there. And when you take a pause, the intuition has a moment to be like, sometimes the voice is quiet, but if you can quiet everything else out, you can actually hear. On this whole journey, intuition has been a huge guiding point. I have many stories for which I won't bore you with, but just even in the past few years, it has been a guiding point that has led me to here, and who knows to where else. And as Julie said, as a fellow type A individual, it's somehow hard to describe that to some people, like my husband or my family. Some people just don't quite understand, but there is a very clear line in the sand when intuition speaks. And I am always working to hear it a little bit more clearly.
Yeah, because I think that there's so much noise piled on top of our intuition. And I forget where I heard this, but someone was speaking about how the first thought we have and our first reaction is often conditioning. And it's our second thought and our response, which is more of our truth. And so it's this difference between reacting and responding. And honestly, I think the difference is in the pause and in that check-in within ourselves. And I think that there can be this gut yes or gut no for some people, but it's when that's coming from within us versus from our minds or whatever else is going on.
You both said such wise things in regards to intuition when Rachel was like creating the space as well earlier. It's similar with intuition, like creating the space in your life to listen to your intuition and giving yourself that opportunity to unwind and connect. But also, I think sometimes we see these like patterns, right? So maybe you're not totally sure what your gut intuition is telling you, but every so often in conversation, you come back to the same idea again. Or when you're out for a walk, you have this recurring thought. And so for me, a simple, well, maybe it's not simple, but a big example would be having my own business. Like for 20 years, I just always was like, what if I started a sock company? Or what if I started a tea store? Or like, it just like always kind of kept coming back to what if I had this company, and then realized one day, oh, I need my own business. Like it's so simple. I'm always coming back to this over and over and over. So yeah, it's sometimes the intuition, even if you're feeling a little confused, and even if you do all the things, you meditate, you connect with a higher self, and you're still not sure. For me, what's been helpful is just looking at patterns. It's like, oh, okay, Julie, you've said this to yourself a million times. Maybe it's time to listen to that and move forward. I need a little extra help, maybe. Might be the case.
I think that that's such a helpful practice. And a lot of it comes back to trust, like trusting ourselves. And that goes back to safety, feeling safe to trust ourselves and feeling safe to hear our intuition and feeling safe in our bodies. And again, sound healing, yoga, these are tools that can really help us find that sense of safety, find that sense of trust, and then let the voice within us get louder and louder. How do you feel like you strengthen and trust that connection to yourself? daily or regularly?
Oh, this is a good one. I think it kind of goes back to similarly what you were just saying is that trust and then the action and seeing the result. So you build the connection between your intuition and the exact action from listening to it. There have been many times that I've done the opposite, where my intuition has spoke very clearly and loudly, and I have ignored it. And then the opposite happens, and then you find yourself reviewing that decision and wondering if things could have been different if you actually had listened to yourself to begin with. And I find myself wanting, I mean, we can't avoid that every single time, but I'm like, okay, like Julie was saying, there's a pattern here.
Mhm.
Let's listen to it. And then seeing the result from the next time that it's like, okay, my intuition is speaking. I'm going to listen and take action in this direction, and watching that unfold is honestly very rewarding and joyous when it aligns. It's really neat. It doesn't always, but when it does, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's magical. And I think that awareness around what our intuition is telling us is the first step. First, it comes with the awareness, and there's still the fear of taking the action. And so building up that trust muscle and then starting to take the action more and more, it's a process. And that's okay. And reminding ourselves that we just have to be honest with ourselves around what we're hearing. And if we're not able to listen to that, that's okay.
Before too, I felt a lot of pressure to figure things out on my own. So even though I had a meditation practice, a yoga practice, I really felt so much pressure to just figure it all out on my own. And then I started to realize also part of yoga, also part of all of these mindfulness traditions is community as well. You talked earlier too about yoga as connection. That actually has been a huge piece in helping me carry out actions aligned with my own intuition, is having a solid community to say, this is what I'm thinking, this is what I'm feeling, and processing it with others who know me and who I trust has actually been really helpful too. Because I think sometimes we think about these practices as very isolating, whereas they're not meant to be isolating at all. They were developed in communities. That's been maybe the component I've leaned into as I've gotten older.
Yeah, I've had a similar experience. And I love talking to people about intuition and how it shows up for them and what that process has been like, because it highlights that everyone has an intuition and everyone's intuition speaks to them in such different ways. And for someone else, it might be really important to not talk to anyone about what their intuition is telling them in order to really strengthen that voice within themselves. And for some other people, speaking about it and having those safe people that you trust to talk to about what you're thinking and process it all is what helps your intuition come to the center. And so it's just about getting curious and exploring how your intuition talks to you. Okay, so your book, Seasons of Sound, like I said, it's so beautiful. And I want to hear a little bit about your decision to write the book and how you're hoping it impacts the world and what you were hoping it brings to the world.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Gosh, the book, it's such a fun story, and it happened really quickly in comparison to maybe many other authors' processes. We had a ton of content from our own trainings and our own experience in developing our sound healing practices as individuals. And we were delivering these amazing trainings with these thick workbooks, and we kept getting the calls. And he's like, "Oh, you should write a book. You should write a book."
Mm.
It kind of came together pretty quickly. We were working against a deadline for a training, and it was kind of a, I don't know, this goes back to my corporate time, but it's called a no go. It's like, are we doing the book? And were like, yes, we were doing a book with a very swift timeline. We pulled everything together. That might sound stressful to some, like having a very quick timeline, but it was so seamless at the same time. We were loving the process, writing and sending to them, and they were like, oh my God, it's so good. Like we would just jive off that energy and continue to write. And then the art from the book came together. We have an incredible illustrator, Karen, who brought the vision to life, honestly, with very little input from us. I was like, yes, that's it. It just came together so well. And what we really hope that we impart is sound healing is vast, and it can also be really simple. There are many different techniques. There are many different ways to provide sound healing for others or for your own practice. We really wanted to demystify it and make it approachable, as well as include different layers that aren't generally as well known to sound healers. From the yoga community, we have a little bit more knowledge about trauma-informed practices, the restorative yoga practices. We wanted to impart that to a wider audience and again make it really accessible for anyone. And the seasons just lent to a perfect a way to put everything together. And we like that, of course, the seasonality of the earth seasons makes a lot of sense, but we wanted individuals to feel empowered to make the practice their own, be it whatever season they're in. That might change month to month or day to day. If you're feeling more of a winter and a summer, we wanted you to feel empowered to make it yours. So it was truly a labor of love.
Everything Jess said is absolutely true. And as well, we wanted something too that was practical for lots of different folks. So if you have a gong or you have your first singing bowl, knowing that you can have a really robust mindfulness practice with a single instrument, as well as people like us who lead sound baths, build communities around sound baths and sound healing, that there would be practices and insights as well, such as like theming, integration of mudra, trauma-informed practices, and meditation too. We've included guided meditation as well, and just creating like a cohesive theme for a sound bath, dependent on the season or season of life. But I will say one thing that's kind of unexpected from writing this book is when you create a project like this, it's really just kindling the fire for more. The second it was done, we were like, okay, now we need to do this thing and this thing and this thing. What we're trying to do right now is really nurture seasons of sound, share the book as a resource for our friends and friends in the sound healing community. But also it's hard to not just want to dive into the next thing because we have so many ideas. When you go through a process like that, I mean, everybody knows this and so every arena of our life, but when you go into a project like this, you come out with so many more exciting things that you want to do. So rather than just the thrill of chasing the next thing, we're really trying to nurture this project, share it through trainings that we lead right now in Texas. But we have lots of ideas. So it's kind of fun. It's all good.
Well, I think that that's just a testament to your alignment with working together and creating this book and working with sound healing, your continued joy for it and passion around it is part of what makes your work so powerful and impactful. And I really love your emphasis on seasons because I really think that there's so much importance in living seasonally and cyclically, whether it's with the seasons of nature or whatever's going on within us. And having the tools that support that is the only way that we can do that. And also, your emphasis on actionable steps that you can really embody no matter who you are or what you're going through. Again, something I'm very passionate about because I think, especially in the yoga world, the wellness world, where things can feel, or inaccessible for so many people, giving everyone and anyone tools that they can incorporate into their life right now to actually have a change in their life in this way is what the world needs.
That is so beautifully said. Thank you for the incredible comments and thoughts. And we just really appreciate you and bringing our book onto your show. It's just been amazing. We love you.
Well, I love you guys, and I'm truly so grateful for both of you and the work you're doing and the energy you're bringing to the world in this space. It's, again, like I said, it's so needed. It's so felt. And that brings me to My last questions, which is living intuitively wild means living dedicated to your true authentic self no matter what. How do you feel like you live intuitively wild?
This podcast could not be a better representation of being intuitively wild for me. This book, the business, the trainings, the practice, being able to lead others in their own mindfulness practice is far and away where I was about 10 years ago. So leaning into that intuition, being bold, and as you say in your podcast, wild enough to kind of break free from the norm and what was expected and from everyone, and doing the harder thing and traversing your own path. I feel very much aligned with being intuitively wild these days. So thank you for giving voice to that and that idea, because it's very, very much felt from this side. So thank you.
Yeah. So a lot of my life, I've worked with young people, and I think I had very clear understanding of my purpose was to help young people feel comfortable in their own skin.
Mm.
And now, as someone who's working with adults, I'm realizing it's the same purpose. Like I hope that I'm just facilitating opportunity for people to just genuinely feel comfortable in their own skin. And what better way to do that than to make sure that I'm working in alignment with my own purpose? So I'm really trying, as you know, we all have we've already talked about childhood. We all have all of these things that hold us back from living in alignment with our genuine purpose. And I know sometimes that can look like profession, where maybe we feel stuck in a profession that's not in alignment. But even within that, within these structures that we all have and roles that we play, I think there's definitely room and space for us to just be and embrace who we really are. So I hope that I'm helping in a general way of just helping us all to embody who we are and feel like there are safe spaces in which we can do that and work on it and connect with our higher selves and our own intuition, like we talked about. So I just hope that I'm playing a small role in helping us all do that a little bit more.
You are. I can tell you you are. Even just reading your book, I know that you are. And this quote that came to my mind when you were talking is, we can only take people as far as we have gone ourselves, is so important for us to keep in mind as we're continuing to facilitate helping people connect to themselves and connect to their bodies and connect to their intuition, always coming back to that within ourselves. And you can tell when a practitioner is not doing that. And it's just it's so clear to me that both of you are practicing what you preach and embodying the energy that you want to imprint on the world. And I'm just grateful to connect with you and so grateful that you both came on. Please share with everyone where they can connect with both of you individually and also get your book and anything you guys are doing together, just all the things. And of course, everything will be linked below.
Thank you so much. You can find our book at seasonsofsoundbook.com. It's available also on Amazon and a few boutiques here in Texas, including Julie's amazing boutique at Soul Strong Yoga. And then if you want to connect with me individually, all of my platforms, I am Sound for Stress and at soundforstress.com. You can also find out more about our trainings there and whatever new things we come up with. You can also there too.
And this is Julie. You can find my yoga studio, soulstrongyoga.com. And then you can find me in the studio on all the platforms at Soul Strong Yoga. So if you reach out, just let me know if you need anything, if you want to talk more. Always happy to talk about sound healing, yoga, meditation. It's just a joy.
Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Intuitively Wild, the podcast. I hope it helped deepen your connection to yourself, sparked some insights, and inspired you to live intuitively wild. If you enjoyed this podcast, it would mean so much to me if you would share it with others and leave a rating and review. And please reach out to me. I would love to connect with you. I will see you next time for more magic.